So you've got that Kreg Jig, now you're all excited to use it, and in my opinion, the first project that you're going to want to start is the Workbench Project. Boom, right there. It's a staple of any shop, wood shop, anything, garage. It's a perfect project, keeps you organized, gives you a place to put stuff, but also gives you a place to work off of, to build any more of the cool projects that Kreg has here. The wonderful thing about this project is that it's simple. It's a great starter because we're just using simple materials. 2x4, very inexpensive. We've got MDF, very inexpensive. What makes this project also fun in a weird way is that we've got everything is laid out for us. We've got a shopping list, so when you go to buy the materials, boom, it's right here. This is exactly what I need. The same thing with our parts to cut. It's all laid out for you. You don't have to think, okay, my workbench, how big do I have to make my rails? How big do I have to make the top? It's all laid out. You just basically follow this, you read it, you make your cuts, and you'll be good to go, and you will be so happy that you can kind of leave that other stuff behind. You don't have to go crazy with the calculator. That being said, one of the things that you're going to definitely need, and on here, it says what tools will you need. We're going to need, these are definitely things you're going to need. One is the Kreg Jig. We're using the K4 today. There are other ones that they have, but this one I think is the most efficient for me, so I like it, so that's why I use it. You're going to need a drill, a circular saw, we're going to need some screws. The other thing, you know, depending on how you want to do it with your shop, we've got a jigsaw here to be efficient, but if you don't have one, you could use just a plain old hand saw. It works fine. Everybody's got, you know, grandpa's saw or something like that in the garage where you can utilize that to make some cuts that way. So with that being said, let's dive right into this. Let's start making some cuts and start this bench. Another great thing is they show you how to maximize the material. We've got all of our 2x4s laid out here, so it's not like you're just cutting 4 34-inch legs. It's basically like you can get 2 34-inch legs out of this 2x4, a 19.5 on the end. What that does is it allows you not to have 18 2x4s and just 5. It keeps your costs down and it keeps you very efficient, which is amazing when it comes to building stuff. So the first thing we'll do, we realize right here, we've got to get 2 34s out of this and then a 19.5. The one thing that I will recommend when you're starting this is be careful. Like if I just basically take my tape measure all the way across and I mark it at 34 like this, now a lot of people might just add 34 to that and say it's 68, I'm going to put another mark and make the cut. The problem there is that the blade has a thickness, and depending on how blade or how much the kerf of your blade leaves, and the kerf is basically the material that it takes away. So what will happen is that one will be 34, one might be a little bit less, like 33 7/8. So it's not going to be optimal. So what I recommend, mark your first one, grab something to basically like a right angle of some kind, and then mark that. And then this is 34. I normally write on it so that way I know it's pretty obvious that it's 34, but you're good to go. And if you second guess, this is your first time with a tape measure, run it back out after you draw your line, and then make sure that you're dead on. That's really important. Now, also, I know that this is my 34-inch piece, so when I cut it, I'm going to want to have the blade on the opposite side or the waist side of the material. That's really important. Now, we know we're getting 2 34s out of this and a 19.5. So to make me efficient, so I'm not doing one cut, one cut, one cut, I'm going to pull the tape off of this side and then take 34 here. And then that way, I've got 19.5, and then that way I can make 2 cuts and then remeasure there. Very, very important, and very simple. So we've got all of our pieces measured, and we're ready to make some cuts. And there's a couple of things that we need to talk about before we make a cut to the circular saw. One, wear yourself a pair of safety glasses. You want to be able to see so that way you can you know, save those pretty blues or browns or whatever you got. The second thing is what I like to do is, because we've made this very simple to build, is I have a couple extra 2x4s laying around, and I'm sure you do around your shop. If you don't, maybe you should think about grabbing a couple extra. What it does is it gives me a surface in which I can cut these 2x4s. The reason why I say that is if I take it on the edge of my sawhorses that I have here and I run my saw this way, that just falls to the ground. And sometimes when you're having to cut, if I have to make this cut right here, that's a lot of material that's going to fall to the ground. And sometimes if you're not running the saw quick enough, what will happen is it'll splinter out the wood here. We don't want that to happen. We want this to be the prettiest bench you've ever made. So just take a couple of 2x4s. Now we can lay the piece that's going to be cut right on top of that, and we have a nice firm base to cut. because the whole point of doing this bench is to give you a firm base. So anytime that you're utilizing it, you want something good to work off of. The other quick thing about the circular saw, what we've done is because we're cutting on top of another surface, we set the blade just so it's a tick below the surface of the material. And I'm going to go forward here and show you that. If you look right here, you set the depth of the blade just a little bit below, so it's not cutting completely through the other 2x4s. And that's good so we don't cut the other 2x4s, but it's also good for chip out, because anytime that you're cutting material, you don't want the blade to be 2 inches below the surface of what you're cutting. If you're cutting 1.5 inches thick material, your blade should just be a tick more than 1.5 inches. And that's really kind of important. So at this point, we're ready to make some cuts. And again, I hate to throw so much information at you and drive you crazy, because I know you want to cut this thing. I use a speed square to make sure that my cut is nice and straight. If you have a miter saw, go grab it. This is probably the ultimate time to make yourself even more efficient. But if you just have a circular saw, a speed square, what it's going to do is allow me to put my saw right up against it, hold it here, keep my fingers away from the blade, and run the saw completely perpendicular so that this cut line right here is a perfect 90-degree angle. And that's really important. You can, however, do it freehand, but you got to take it really, really nice and slow, especially if you're new to this thing. So I recommend the speed square. It might help you out a little bit, get better results in the end. So we've got a couple of pieces of wood to cut, so let's start cutting. One down. That's going to be the best looking leg of a bench I've ever seen in my life. Look at that. All right, so all the pieces are cut. Now we're ready for a little joinery, and this is where it gets a little bit fun. We've got, boom, where's everything here? I've got, do your checklist. Come back here, make sure you got all your parts. I've got 4 legs, 4 long rails, and 4 end rails. Perfect. Now I can start the joinery. To do that, we're going to use the K4 again. And how we're going to do it, now if you've got a workbench, obviously you're building one, so you don't have anywhere else to put it. But if you've got one, and this is just a secondary one, you can actually secure it right to the workbench yourself. You can put it on a piece of plywood, screw down through it, and that way you can be sort of mobile. But today, we're going to make it really, really simple. We're going to use the same 2x4s that we have here. We're just going to take it and actually clamp it right to the edge of the 2x4. Gives us another little work table, kind of you take it with you, that kind of thing. So that way we can be efficient with all of our joinery. So clamp it up, and then we'll start drilling some bucket holes. Now we've got a nice secure work surface. And I'm going to grab some scraps. And by the way, you didn't mess up. There's going to be material left over, which is cool because now you can build something else in your garage out of 2x4s. So we'll just grab one to show you real quick. The thickness of a 2x4 is 1.5 inches. Take your tape measure, just do a double check, 1.5 inches right there. Now, that is going to be very important for us when we're using the Kreg Jig, because we have to make sure that our setting is appropriate for the thickness of material we're using. So, we come on down here, actually we come on over here, you have to spin all the way around. And right here, very, very simple. It's just basically a set screw that unleashes. Right now, it's already set to 1.5 inches. But what's cool about this is that if I'm using 3/4 inch material, there's a little tick mark right here. So all I have to do is unloosen this screw. I've been getting good at tightening and loosening. There we go. It's a long screw. And then just push it so that this little indentation matches the top of the actual jig itself. So then I just put the screw back in. And I'm ready to go for 3/4 inch material. Unfortunately, I got to change it back to the 1.5 inches, so I just got to flip it that way. But that brings me to another step in this process, is right here. That's your stepped drill bit. Really important here, this collar slides up and down. Really neat thing about the Kreg Jig is that instead of having to measure, you can measure, by the way. Take your tape measure, and then go to the stepped part, and I think it has to be for 1.5 inches, it has to be like 4 1/8. That's kind of a pain in the butt to actually do this. That's no fun. So what we want to do is take it out of the drill. Now we can grab our, Allen set that comes with a kit, which is really cool. Everything you need is right here. So now we can just take it, loosen up this Allen, I should have had my Wheaties. And now I can